Rich, and today we're going to talk about Archer-Daniels Midland. They are under the ticker symbol ADM. And if you haven't heard about this stock, well, or company, it's not surprising. They're not that well known, but if you have heard about it, you've probably watched Sven Carlin's video, or maybe you are just really aware or really into companies that make ingredients for different ingredient and baking companies. So yeah, anyways, which is totally fine. Now, so what Archer-Daniels Midland does is kind of like what I mentioned. They make ingredients. They're very much involved in the agricultural industry. They have several products relating around agricultural products, and they process these products and separate them into different ingredients for other companies. And they're very huge. They've been around for a long time, since 1902. They have over 40,000 employees, I think. And yeah, they make ingredients like high fructose corn syrup, natural flavors, all sorts of things, fibers, any of these things that you read on an ingredient list and you're like, I don't know what that is. They probably make it. So that's what they do. They've been around for a long time, and they just keep on chugging along. So the reason I'm doing this video is when I watched Sven Carlin's video, he mentioned this is an interesting stock, and I kind of thought, well, maybe I'll put my approach to it and see what I think is the value in this, and if it is a good buy or not. So yeah, so if we get into it right now, the price has pulled back a little bit because of the China-US trade wars. So I thought, is it a good time to buy? Currently, after hours, the stock is sitting at $41.20. That gives it a PE ratio of 14.2. Generally, I think, depending on the industry, it changes, but generally, PE ratio of about 22 is usually pretty reasonable. Maybe if you're getting into forward P's, you're probably looking at something like 16 to 18 is pretty reasonable. So when I see a PE ratio of 14.2 and a forward PE ratio of 12.3, which is their analyst estimates, then I think, oh, okay, this seems like a little bit cheap, and it does seem like it's growing because the forward PE is lower than the PE. And then when you look at the price to book ratio, it's 1.2. So anything close to 1 or below is really cheap. You're buying their assets for the book value or less. Or anything between 1 and 2 is usually reasonable, and the closer you get to 1, it's better. Something over 2 could be expensive, but it really depends on the type of business. So yeah, we're at 1.2. I think that's pretty decent. Now the dividend is at 3.4%, and it's been it's a growing dividend. It continues to grow. I think it doubled in about 8 years. So if they double the dividend, it kind of keeps up with I don't know, maybe inflation, although inflation these days is pretty low. But yeah, so doubling in 2 years or in 8 years, that's not too bad. So one thing that was kind of discouraging about this company is that its 5-year growth rate for its intrinsic value is about 2.5%. So it's really not keeping pace with the general industry, and there are reasons. It has struggled as of late, but if you look back at it historically, and I mean, this company has been around since the early 1900s, 1902, and it's been growing fairly consistently. It grows at around 8 or 9% per year, and so it wouldn't be that hard to conceive that it could grow at 8 or 9% per year in the future. So this might be just a little bit of a blip, and this might be one reason why the stock price is a little bit low if you look at their PE and price to book ratio. So yeah, what do I think? The positive case scenario for me is that this company is going to get back to that 8 or 9 or maybe even more for growth rate, 8 or 9%, and then it just keeps on chugging along. It's kind of recession proof. People need food still, so it's one of those stocks where it's just going to keep, or companies that's just going to keep growing regardless, as long as the population grows. And yeah, that's the positive side. The negative side for this is that people might not see much value in this stock, so they could be undervalued for a long time. You could see a huge aversion towards not whole foods. Like, people might want more whole foods as opposed to several different ingredients that are all broken up. Everything's broken into its different little fibers or molecules and then put into new kind of recipes. People might not like that in the future, and so that's something to maybe keep in mind. But right now it's not really obvious, so it does seem like it's a pretty stable business. It does seem like it's going to go up, so I'm kind of leaning more towards the positive side. And for a value, I kind of think right now this company, it's reasonable to think that the price should be around $47.60. Maybe with its growth rate being so slow, if they don't improve their growth rate, maybe a little bit lower. So maybe what it is at seems reasonable. But historically, since they've been growing so consistently, yeah, I don't see why not $47, $47.60, something like that wouldn't be very reasonable. So with that in mind, it was $41. It already seems like a decent buy. Of course, I would want a margin of safety. I would kind of think probably if it's closer to the $40 mark, that would be a lot better for me. With Donald Trump in power, there's every second week there's a good chance that things can get volatile and stocks might drop. So there is a possibility this stock could get in a really good spot. And if you get that price, you're looking at a very reasonable chance of getting 18% gain, something like that. Plus you get your 3.4% dividend, which is growing. And if you hung on to it for a long time and it was growing at 8 or 9%, then in 10 years you would be looking at something on the average of 15% per year, which is pretty good. It's better than the S&P, so it's definitely a good potential stock to look into. I personally think if it gets below 40, I would definitely be very intrigued with this company. Now, if it can't improve its growth rate for some reason, there's some systemic problem and it just keeps getting slower and slower growth, I still see this as a reasonable company if it can just it might not grow at the pace you want, but you could just, if it's not growing that fast, maybe still the next couple of years you could get the price to come back to a reasonable level and make decent money on it. So that's kind of my thought. And then also, I've seen this stock in the past, it has gone 50% over its kind of intrinsic value, and so in that case you could see this company going as high as like $70 for now. I mean, like in the future, those are kind of moving targets as earnings and assets and everything kind of change. But right now, yeah, so you could see 47 is a reasonable number in my mind, and $70 is a really high end, just if you get lucky kind of thing. So yeah, I'd love to know what you guys think. Do you guys think this is a great buy? Do you think it is worth buying now, or do you think it's worth buying lower? Like I'm saying, I think $40 is more reasonable for me, but I'd love to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you in the next video.